For as long as I can remember, Christmas Eve was a very special time in my life and for my family. Ever since growing up as a small boy in central Pennsylvania, Christmas Eve was a magical time. It was a time that we would gather as family, as community, on the night before Christmas, the big day. And we would gather in our church at St. Luke's, and we would celebrate Christmas Eve, the tradition that still follows me down all these years. We would gather late at night. Now, in central Pennsylvania, we would have Christmas Eve at 11 o'clock so that when the service was over, it was actually Christmas Day. And so we would take that walk down the street. And in my memory, there was always snow on the ground, and we would make our way to the church. And people would gather in their finest clothes for Christmas. And we would gather and we would retell the Christmas story, and we would sing those favorite songs. And of course, we would sing that classic song that, regardless of your background or what denominations you're from, it seems to bind us together. Silent night, holy night. And in that wonderful symbol of unity, we would all light our candles, reminding us that Christ had come and that we share the light of Christ in us. Well, this year is going to be a little bit different. Well, actually, it's going to be a lot different. I'm here in the middle of an empty sanctuary, and hopefully that you're outside sharing this time with us. And I got to tell you, I'm not really happy about it. I like my traditions. I like my routines. I like my carols. I like knowing that we as a church family are still together. And yet we have to find a different way this year. And so I've been asking myself this question that I often ask you every Sunday. What do you think God is trying to tell us this year? Is there something that we can get this year by doing it this way, in a way that is far different than we've ever done before? Is there something that we can learn about Christmas that we could learn no other way? I mean, think about it for a moment. What do padded pews and poinsettias, presents and trees and tinsel, what do they have to do with the original story? Maybe what we're doing is we're going back to the original. We have to explore again what God has been trying to break through to tell us. Maybe this is that once-in-a-lifetime opportunity where we can understand Christmas from a whole unique perspective. Something we didn't ask for, something we would not have wanted, but something that God wants for us, for you and for me this year. And so I'm going to ask you to go on a journey with me this year, something a little different, because this has been a year that is all about different, in order to explore the original story, to understand what really happened with Mary and Joseph. Why did God choose this story for the birth of Christ? And what is it that we can learn along the way? Well, friends, I'm going to invite you to set aside all of your preconceived ideas, all of your traditions and your habits. I love them too. And explore with me what really happened on that first Christmas. And understand why God has been reaching out to us through Emmanuel. God is with us. So if you're game, if you're ready for an adventure, if you're ready to go farther, to do more, I want to invite you on this journey with me. Are you game? Come on, let's go. So here it is. This is what I've been wanting to show you. Out here in a simple stable, out here in the middle of nowhere, there are no pews, there are no poinsettias, there's no pianos or tinsel or colored lights or colored packages. Just a lot of hay. And it's pretty cold too. And it's very, very quiet. That's the part that I wanted to share with you this evening. And that's why I brought you out here. There are some things that I want to show you. Actually, there's something that I want you to experience for yourself. Something that I felt the very first time that I came out here. You can kind of sense it. You can feel it pressing upon you. Something that you can't find in the sanctuary. Even though we've got beautiful music and we've got all of the trappings and the symbols of our faith. Something that you have to find here for yourself. If you haven't guessed, tonight's going to be a lot different. That shouldn't be any big surprise. This whole year has been different. Why would Christmas Eve be any different? Somebody once said, never waste a good crisis. So this is our once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to leave the sanctuary and to come out here to a simple stable. And imagine what that first Christmas was like. And particularly, why was it done like this? What is it that you feel out here? What is it that you sense that you can never feel in the sanctuary? What happened? Now, you may find that going through this process may be a little uncomfortable. It's not exactly going to be a happy, ho, 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 what's in it for me variety. But I think that if you let it, and I must emphasize the if part, it will change you. It will draw you out and awaken you to the possibilities of what Christmas is really all about. And I think that that's a good thing. But if you don't mind, let me just show you around here a little first. Over here in the corner, just kind of outside the line of sight, there's a small group of shepherds. Now, I'm not exactly sure what they're doing here. And to be quite honest, they're not really sure either. They have this story about hearing voices from heaven that told them to come here. That's not exactly what you want to hear from shepherds who spend most of their day and nights out in the middle of the fields, that they're starting to hear voices. Now behind me, just outside the camera, is Belle and Gypsy, two of God's faithful creatures that have come to watch and to wonder what's happening. Now don't tell them this, but I can't really tell them apart. They kind of look the same to me. But I suppose they're just like you. They're wondering what it is that we're doing out here tonight. Why are we not back in our sanctuary, where it's nice and warm and cozy? The pews are a little padded, and it's a lot more convenient. Maybe Belle and Gypsy are a lot smarter than they look. There's one more group, and they're kind of hovering around here somewhere. You know, all of heaven is gathered this evening. They're holding their breath. They're watching, and they're waiting, and they're wondering, what's God up to? But more importantly, I think they're wondering, what are you up to? What difference will this evening make in your life? What impact will the events that have unfolded here, how will it translate into your future? Well, let me catch you up a little bit on the story, the backstory of what's happening here. Years ago, there was a man who ruled most of the known world. He was at the top of the pyramid. He was the king of all the known empire at that time. His name was Gaius Octavius. But he kind of gave himself a very special name that you know, called Caesar Augustus, son of the living God. And what Caesar wanted to do is he wanted everybody in Judea to go back to their home of origin so that they could be part of a census. And as a result of the census, then you could tax people. Because Caesar saw people as tax revenue, things that you could extract from them for their own purposes. But believe it or not, Caesar is not the purpose of this story. He's only the thing that gets the ball rolling. The real central piece of this story are two real peasants named Mary and Joseph. You're probably well aware of who they are. And Joseph was part of the family line of King David that ruled centuries before. And so Joseph had to make the journey from his home, which was in Nazareth, all the way to Bethlehem in order to register for the census. But he was betrothed, and that's kind of special because it means that they were not yet married, but that they were engaged. And so they took the journey from Nazareth to Bethlehem. But the interesting part is that Mary is already pregnant. Now, if you live in Judea at that time and you were pregnant before you were married, this was a scandal of the greatest magnitude you can imagine. And it tells us that when they got to Bethlehem, after shortly being in Bethlehem, Mary gave birth to a son. And she wrapped him in cloth and she laid him in a manger. And a manger is where the animals would eat, in a stable. But it's the part at the very end of that passage in chapter 2 and verse 7. It says, she laid him in a manger because there was no room for him in the village. There was no room for them in the village. Now, when I came out here about a week or so ago, I could feel this weight kind of pressing upon you as you kind of sit here in the quiet of a stable. There's this heaviness about this place, something that you would never feel in the sanctuary, something that only this quiet can give you. In order to understand what I'm talking about, it takes a little time to settle in. And I wonder if you can pick it up yet, even in your own life. There's a weight of loneliness that kind of settles upon you in this quietness. You can feel the weight of it pressing upon you, the despair and the depression. You see, most of the time, what we do is we schedule worship to do it for a convenient time that meets our schedule. You see, we don't want it to interfere too much with our plans. I've even had several people ask me this week, so this service that you're planning for Christmas Eve, I mean, it's only going to take 45 minutes, right? See, what they're really asking is, we have important things to do. You're not going to screw it up, are you? You see, oftentimes we do church, and then we go back to our normal lives, completely unchanged, unmoved, and unaware that God's presence was with us. John Lennon once wrote a song, and he said, "And so this is Christmas. And what have you done? Another year older, and a new one just begun." But for Mary and Joseph, this was their life. They lived this. They didn't go back to their normal life. This was life. And that makes all the difference. And so when you sit here for a while in the quiet and in the cold, the overwhelming sense of loneliness settles in. You see, loneliness is different than just being alone. When you're alone, you're separated from people for a time, but you can get back to them eventually, whenever you want to, in about a half an hour, when this is all said and done, and when all of our families have gone back to their homes, you'll be back with your loved ones. But loneliness is very different. Loneliness is a sense of abandonment, to be unwanted and to be unloved. Lonely is not being without people. Lonely is feeling that no one cares. You see, for Mary and Joseph, they are here in this place because this is their life. The reason that they're here is that no one would open their home or their hearts to them. Can you imagine the pain of Joseph looking into the eyes of his young bride about to give birth and saying, "This is the best I can do. I'm sorry, this is all I have to offer you"? Can you imagine the pain of Mary, wondering if she's the reason that people don't welcome them into their home? They're now ostracized and they're outcast. You see, in ancient times, hospitality wasn't just some sort of social nicety or etiquette. It was about basic human decency. And so the reason that Mary and Joseph are here in a stable with hay and with the animals was not that the Holiday Inn was overbooked or that Travelocity had lost their reservation, but because nobody wanted them. Period. As a matter of fact, later in Jesus' ministry, when people want to undermine what he's doing, they do so by making reference to Mary. In Mark chapter 6, verse 3, they see what Jesus is doing and they're saying, isn't this the carpenter? And isn't this Mary's son? And they took offense at him. You see, you never spoke of sons in terms of their mother. You always talked about them in terms of the male patriarch of the family, unless you want to shame them or humiliate them. Isn't this Mary's son? So Mary and Joseph huddled together to try and stay warm. I can imagine this conversation taking place as the days unfold. Mary, Joseph said, I'm sorry that this is the best that I can do. Not exactly what I promised. And he hung his head in shame. Joseph, Mary said, I'm sorry this baby is not yours. Do you think you'll ever be able to look at me differently? You see, loneliness tells you that you're unwanted, you're unloved, and that you're worthless. Mother Teresa once said that the most terrible poverty of all humanity is its loneliness, the feeling of being unloved and unwanted. The biggest disease that we have in humanity today is the feeling of that we're all alone in the universe. The whole world is lonely. We know that there's something wrong. And this year we've had to struggle with pandemics and politics and our insatiable appetite for power. We're struggling to fill the emptiness, the void of trying to save ourselves. We all know that there's something wrong with the world and with us and with our relationships. But what can we do? This is why I have brought you here. Loneliness is incredibly humbling and it's very hard to take, which is why we have so much noise in our culture, why we stay so busy. We all tend to overshop, we overeat, we overwork, and we overplay, all because we can't stand the loneliness of being worthless. So here it is in this stable, in this lonely of lonely places. You can't hide here. You can't pretend. All the masks that we wear have got to come off and we face the truth. And so isn't it interesting that in a place like this, with Mary and Joseph, that God begins to do a new thing? Just when we thought it was all over, God breaks in and a light begins to grow. In Matthew chapter 4, people living in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of the shadow of death, a light has dawned. I think that's why Christmas happened in a place like this. It happened here the way that it did, so that we knew that God is all about Emmanuel, God with us. You don't have to be lonely. You know, God changed all of that. And so because of Christmas, we know with certainty that God is not indifferent to our loneliness. He knows the source of our greatest pain, and everyone feels his presence at some point. Corrie ten Boom, who survived the Holocaust and the Second World War, even though she was in that pit of death and despair, she said, there is no pit so deep that God's love is not deeper still. It happened here in the darkest of places so that no one would know that they were left out. Augustine once said, you have made us for yourself, O God, and our hearts are restless until they rest in thee. Christmas doesn't eliminate the problem of loneliness, but it does change the question. You see, this little baby that we celebrate tonight, this little light that begins to grow, he grew up. He said a lot of things, and he did a lot of things, and he changed the world when he came back from the dead and offered himself for the rest of eternity. The only question that remains, I guess, is, are you ready for new and better things? Are you ready to make room for Jesus in your life? Mary and Joseph's story is only the beginning of a much, much bigger story that encompasses the whole world and speaks to us through every generation and every age. I pray that our Christmas Eve, this strange, wonderful story that we get to be a part of, is not the end of your story, but the beginning of a whole new chapter. Because all of us feel lonely at one point or another. And so Emmanuel has come. I pray that some of this child's light will continue to grow in your life, and that you will have renewed hope and strength and faith that God's plan for your life is just beginning. Because I realize that true faith is the realization that God is not done with us yet. And so we continue each and every day with the light that we have been given. Friends, in a little while, you'll each have an opportunity as we share together Silent Night and raise our candle against the coming darkness. We become the light bearers. We have the opportunity to share that message in our homes and with the people that we work with and in our neighborhoods. It's up to us to share that message this Christmas. And so, friends, I ask that you depart in peace and take with you the certain knowledge that God is always coming into the world. We will look for God not in long ago stables or ancient mangers, but in the people that we meet and in the depth of our own heart. May the blessings of Christmas make you a blessing to others. And may the peace of this season pervade and overflow in all that you do. So friends, from all of us at Mount Pleasant to all of you wherever you are, Merry Christmas.